If you think that Nemo and SpongeBob are the only things that are underneath the water, then you are most definitely wrong. The water is full of millions of microorganisms that are invisible to our eye. Hi, my name is Jessica Krasnov, and my research inquiry focuses on microbes in freshwater ecosystems. Microbes are typically about 100 micrometers in length. Because of flooding and runoff, microbes are introduced to freshwater ecosystems. The exposure of microbes to human populations has been deemed detrimental and has led to dire health consequences, such as the onset of gastroenterological illnesses and, in severe cases, premature mortality. Due to the infrequent inspection, microbes often go undetected, which ultimately results in illness and increasing outbreaks. Authors Ragibier and Matches incubated E. coli to observe controlled growth conditions. They isolated samples from human fecal matter. However, this research focuses on the temperature growth range, and it says that it grows in 24.3 degrees to 41 degrees Celsius. Further evidence is required to justify the presence of these microbes, however, because this study focuses on an incubated environment rather than a natural environment. According to one study published by Verma and other authors, there was an outbreak in England and Wales. 106 cases of E. coli were reported. These people, they got infected because they swam in contaminated waters. There were 8 confirmed cases, 7 out of 22 which were children, and 1 out of 22 were adults, making the infections rate 32% and 3%. Generally, there's a consensus among the scientific community in which E. coli has actually been deemed to be detrimental to human health. However, certain strains of E. coli have aided human health, and other bacteria have as well. They've done this by assisting with synthesizing vitamin K, promoting intestinal nerve function, helping with blood vessel development, and assisting with cellulose digestion. Also, a strain of E. coli known as E. coli Nissl 1917 has nowadays been used as a probiotic to help with certain gastroenterological illnesses. This has been studied by Conway and Cohen, and these two people are professors at the University of Oklahoma and the University of Rhode Island. In a study by Stebic and other authors, the authors discussed the impact that nematodes have on certain populations. The study focused on secondary infections in which patients had already been weakened because they had contracted these nematodes. And the study also proposed promising methods of control. The nematodes were found to be in warm and moist areas. Also, something interesting about this study is that I have found that nematodes have a dual nature. In other words, depending on the environment, if it's suitable in that environment and its generation, it can revert to free-living bacteria or nematodes and parasitic form. And nematodes, they infect people because they come in contact with the skin. So why is this relevant? Why does this matter to you? As you can see from the diagram, the number of outbreaks and illnesses has been increasing. Approximately 50% of the human population worldwide is affected by nematodes today. There have been about 3.5 million estimated cases, and 450 million of that 3.5 billion have had serious ill symptoms. As far as E. coli goes, there have been 350 outbreaks, which has been 8,598 cases. And this has been found from 1982 to 2002. Out of those people, 1,493 have been hospitalized. And this information was reported by 49 states. One state was omitted. So all of this information has led me to my research question. To what extent is the population density of microbes, specifically E. coli and nematodes, in various freshwater regions affected by temperature? And how does this correspond to the potential risk of a population's health? The purpose of my experiment was to determine how many microbes were prevalent in freshwater regions, and I studied them in Hillsborough County. My hypothesis was that more microbes would be prevalent in temperatures above 24.3 degrees Celsius because ragged beard matches found that 24.3 degrees Celsius was the minimum temperature for optimum growth. This research design used the mixed method. It was selected because including a survey is going to complement the data that was gathered through the experiment. Survey data is going to be beneficial to assessing potential risk because it's going to indicate the activities that should receive a greater attention when determining a solution. My survey was 5 questions long, and it identified demographic information as well as the activities that people have participated in. It was both quantitative and qualitative because one of the questions that I included had a fill in the blank options that people could write in what activities they participated in. My experimental design was the second segment of my research. I collected samples from different regions in Hillsborough County. 8 samples from each trial were taken. The goal of this section was to identify the population density of these nematodes because I wanted to determine if people were at risk in this region. I measured the water temperature, and after that, I lowered the test tubes with pulling line to retrieve them from the lakes, and I chilled them in a refrigerator for preservation. To prepare for testing, I put the water samples on a glass slide. I then used a gram staining process, which would differentiate whether bacteria was gram-negative or gram-positive. Now, in this case, E. coli is gram-negative, which means that the E. coli is not going to retain the crystal violet stain that I used, and it's going to appear red. So crystal violet was first applied to the slide, and after that, saffron and O, and after that, ethanol was used as a decolorizer to get the final result. 2 trials were conducted, Trial A, which is in February, and Trial B, which is in March. There were 16 samples total, 8 samples per trial, and I found that there was no E. coli per 1 milliliter sample for all trials. However, there was the presence of nematodes, as you can see in this chart. A couple examples include the Bayesian rat marina, which had 5 nematodes for Trial A and 4 nematodes for Trial B. However, on the other hand, Lake Marywater had 0 nematodes for Trial A and 0 nematodes for Trial B. The survey that I conducted had 329 total participants. 72% were female, which consisted of 237 people. And there were 92 males, or about 28%. Across all age groups, the number of people, they all chose swimming, for one exception. Adult females in Hillsborough County, and they chose kayaking. In the 14 to 15-year-old age group, there were 17 participants in Hillsborough County that participated in an activity within 1 to 2 months. 26 participated in the 16 to 17-year-old age group within 1 to 2 months in swimming. I also noticed a trend that arose among the 18 to 19-year-old age groups in Hillsborough County, with the exception of the 46 to 55-year-olds. The frequency of the majority's participation all lie within the past year range, with the exception of that one group. As stated earlier, the purpose of this presentation of this research inquiry was to first evaluate the findings of microbes and how many are prevalent. From there, I analyze the participation of people in those activities so that I can then determine the potential risk. My hypothesis was partially supported by my data. The Basin Rat Marina temperatures were 22.72 degrees Celsius in trial A and 23.82 degrees Celsius in trial B. However, the Basin Rat Marina contained 4 nematodes in trial B and 5 nematodes in trial A. The Lake Merriwater temperature trial included 25.8 degrees Celsius in trial A and 27.71 degrees Celsius in trial B, but there were no nematodes in either of the trials or E. coli. I believe that the lack of E. coli in the sample is due to no recent sewage leaks and runoff in the area. Something interesting that I noticed while I was observing was that there were more nematodes in rural communities as opposed to urban communities. I surmise that this is probably because urban communities tend to have maintenance programs that help clean the water. However, Lake Wyatt, Long Lake Ranch, it did contain nematodes. 1 milliliter sample contained 1 nematode for both trial A and trial B. So this shows that there still is potential risk even in urban communities that have these high maintenance programs. The step of analyzing water was really crucial because it showed that these areas do have potential risk. I took note of the temperatures of the samples, and this allowed me to come to the conclusion that temperature is not necessarily the only factor that influences whether something is prevalent in an area, because other factors could contribute to it, as shown in no E. coli in either of the samples. Most participants in my survey answered swimming as the #1 activity that they participated in. So the concern established in the study by Verma and the other authors was confirmed. It was inconsistent with the previously mentioned study because no E. coli was found in any of the samples, and that study had said that E. coli would be found in that optimal growth range. The most likely cause of infection was swallowing water, and I thought that was interesting to include. With the inclusion of a survey instrument, I was able to discover that the majority of participants lie within that 1 to 2 frequency range of participation. From there, this led me to developing a solution to this issue. I think that people should instill regulations for freshwater regions. At times of potentially harmful levels, lakes should be sectioned off to discourage public use. And lakes and rivers should both be monitored within 1 to 2 months, every 1 to 2 months, so that people can know exactly what's in these lakes and rivers. Not only would this decrease exposure, but it would also allow us to keep an eye on everything that's happening in those lakes. I also think that this information should be made publicly available so people can know exactly what's in it. So why is this significant? Why does this matter to you and to me? It's simple. During months of prolonged rainfall, lakes and rivers tend to swell and flooding occurs. Some familiar regions that tend to flood include the Hillsborough River and Tampa Bay. So this is dangerous to adult pedestrians and children. Children tend to play in water, so parents need to know that there are microbes in this water that could pose a potential risk. It was found that throughout age groups, swimming held the highest number of exposure. I think that because there was no runoff, there was no E. coli as well. The fact that I found swimming held the highest exposure shows that all the people who participated in swimming could have a potential risk. However, there's not enough evidence to authenticate a claim for a specific level. So this can continue in a couple of future directions. Out of the participants who were studied and surveyed, the next step is to find out which of those participants actually got sick. This could provide the fundamental basis for determining the relationship between illness, the presence of E. coli or nematodes, and participation in a freshwater activity.
Good job.
Very.
Thank you.
All right, first question is mine. What was one obstacle or challenge you encountered in performing your research, and how did you address it?
One obstacle and challenge that I had was that there was no E. coli in my samples, and I was expecting there to be E. coli. So how I addressed this was I simply stated in my research there was no E. coli, and I did notice that there were nematodes, so I included that in my research as well, and so that's how I addressed it.
Mr. Dillon?
I think the real world implications were pretty obvious. You did a really good job covering that. But which of the various perspectives that you explored was the most difficult for you to incorporate into your research inquiry, and why?
I think that the perspective that E. coli was beneficial to humans was the most difficult for me,
Okay.
because E. coli is known to be pathogenic and to harm so many people. And a lot of my studies, like the one on England and Wales saying how people were severely impacted, all of that covers pathogenic E. coli, but not a lot of studies include why it's beneficial and how it could help or not do anything to humans.
All right, last question. If you had 3 more months to work on this, what additional research strategies would you put in place?
I think I would interview medical professionals to see how they deal with these cases and what they have done to help these people who have been affected, and how they can take the next step to maybe producing a medicine that could help with this, and so on.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You are